Hello and welcome back to the Master Shamanism class. So, today we are going to be talking about the Ansuz rune. This is an incredibly important rune. I cannot overemphasize the importance of this rune. Of course, that's true about all of them, but this one is extremely important when it comes to the work that we're doing here. You know, call it magic, call it shamanism, call it enlightenment, however you want to look at it. This is the rune that is directly connected to human evolution and spiritual evolution. So this rune we're going to be really focusing on. As you can see, I'm only talking about this one rune today. And in honor of this rune, which is the rune of communication, I'm here without any notes. I'm just going to see, what comes through me, what the gods bring to me about this, because there's so much to talk about. So before I get into that, let me once again remind you of the resources that are necessary. In this talk today, I am going to be most likely talking about aspects of all three of these books. So here are the three rune books. So here they are. If you haven't already, get your hands on either the books or the DVDs or the videos connected to these three books. Okay, so, and there are, those are the books, but there's also some videos out there. There's some DVDs for each one of those books. And I believe for the first book, Rune Shamanism, I uploaded the videos that I put on DVD. I uploaded it to thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. Again, because there were people who were complaining, oh, I don't have money to spend on this. Why can't you just put it on your YouTube channel? So I did, and almost nobody is watching it. So, that's a really valuable resource. So you can watch the Rune Shamanism videos on the YouTube channel, but you may need to get the other two books. Anyway, it's good to have those books. It's just good to have. So I want you to take a look at the rune wheel and look at where the Ansuz rune is, and just kind of get that imprinted into your mind for a second. So, if you've noticed in the southeast, where the Ansuz rune is located, there are two other runes that are connected to it. So as you know, the first ring of runes is going to be more focused on the physical realm. The middle rune is going to be focused on the emotional, the psychological realm. And the outside rune is going to be the spiritual realm. Of course, you can't pigeonhole the runes, but that's the general focus of them. And so you notice that the other two runes was Yera, which is cooperation or relationship. And the next one was Manaj, which is mind, meditation. So what this rune is beginning to create in us is the ability, first off, to communicate. The rune is called God Mouth. And that has to do with speaking or communicating divine knowledge. So at the very first level of this rune, even on the physical level, is opening ourselves up to receive communication from the ancestors, from the gods, from the spiritual realm. When we do that, that gives us the ability to have a relationship, which is the Yera rune. Gives us a relationship with the gods, with the universe. And then that in itself gives us the ability to have true mind, which is the reflection of the soul, true manaj, the ability to see things objectively, the meditative mind. So that's the first thing, in terms of divination, that's the first thing that comes up. When the rune comes up right side up, then what we're talking about, the default interpretation of that is receiving communication from the gods, from the ancestors. In other specific instances, it can be talking about, of course, our communication with others. But I'm not really going to focus so much on divination in this class, because I think it's really, really important that we connect this rune to where it is placed in the rune wheel, in the thunder wheel, which is the southeast. So, you may have heard me say this before, but the southeast is what is known as the human door. Now, this is something that, one of the reasons that again, when I put this body of knowledge together, which I'm calling, thunder shamanism, thunder wizardry, as I was putting it together, really I had all these separate parts from other traditions. I had the Taoist tradition, and I had the Vedic tradition, and of course I had what was available to us in the European, the Norse tradition. And so lots of times I would just, like a jigsaw puzzle, I would take different pieces and just sort of put them together and see if they fit. And in the beginning, when I was doing that, I wasn't trying to force anything. I was just like, hey, that kind of goes with that. Let's sort of layer them together and see what happens. And then what ends up happening is it's like you have these three independent functioning gears that when you put them together, it's like all of a sudden something comes out of them and they come together and they create this unified whole, which I think is part of what this tradition is designed to do. I think that the ancestors have been giving me this information and giving me access to these different traditions so that they can actually unify them together. And we're evolving. This is a path that is evolving into something new. So as it turns out, this is part of what this rune is about, receiving information and using that towards our evolution. So the human door is a term that I got from Taoism. And, in Taoism, they talk about the southeast as being the human door, meaning this is where human beings, the energy of being a human, not just like a human animal, but a divine human. That's where this is coming from. This is a realm of the subconscious mind. The southwest is the unconscious mind. That's the underworld. And you can understand that when you die, what you have to deal with is all those unconscious issues. And that is what actually propels you into the next life is, the unresolved unconscious issues. The subconscious, there's a difference. People throw out the word unconscious and subconscious and, we don't know which one is which. So let me share with you what the three realms of consciousness are. You have waking consciousness, which is exactly what it sounds like. But it's the tip of the iceberg. So as you know, I don't know what the percentage is. It's something like 90-something% of an iceberg is actually underneath the surface of the water. But what you see on the top is just the tip of the iceberg. The vast majority of the iceberg is underneath the surface of the water. So the conscious mind is the tip of the iceberg. Now the conscious mind thinks that it is in control. The conscious mind thinks it is making all of its decisions and all of its reactions, but the truth is that the vast majority of all of our thoughts and reactions and feelings are coming from our unconscious, and we are a slave to our unconscious. That is just the fact of the matter. That's the bulk of the iceberg that you can't see when you're on the boat. That's why, by the way, icebergs are so dangerous, because you think the iceberg is way over there, and what you don't realize is that, there's this big giant part of it that your boat is running into. The whatever it was, the Titanic, that kind of thing. Oh, the iceberg's way over there. No, it's not. It's right underneath you because it expands underneath. That's the danger of the unconscious mind. You can't really see all that's there, but it will have its effect on you. Now, the subconscious mind. So we know what the conscious and the unconscious is. The subconscious mind is that part that's, if this is the water, it's just right here. It's the part of the mind that is both conscious and unconscious at the same time. The subconscious mind is the part of your mind that remembers your PIN number, your password, your address, your phone number, your wife's birthday, hopefully, your dog's name, what your schedule is. It's not something that you keep in your conscious mind. You don't have to consciously keep telling yourself what your driver's license number is or your social security number. But when you want it, you can call it and it's right there. That's not the case with the unconscious mind. You can't simply snap your fingers and have your unconscious awareness come to your conscious mind. That's virtually impossible. That we get better at that the more conscious we become. But that's not the function of the unconscious mind. The unconscious mind is so incredibly powerful. It is like a god in and of itself. It is so powerful. But the subconscious mind is also very powerful because, as you can see, it stores a lot of information in the subconscious mind. And it's information that you can't keep in your conscious mind. Your conscious mind you can only deal with what's right in front of you. But your unconscious and your subconscious mind are constantly figuring out how much information to give to you at any given moment. So these are the three minds. This is the realm of the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind is the mind of meditation. It's also the mind of when you do shamanic journeying. Because when you do shamanic journeying, lots of times what you're doing is you're traveling into your unconscious. By the way, let me talk about something that's really important. This is something that is not well understood in modern New Age spirituality. And part of it has to do with the misunderstanding of what the subconscious and the unconscious is. So when we're talking about taking, for instance, dreams, we'll just talk about dreams for right now. When you go to sleep at night and you have a dream, there are, all different kinds of dreams, but, I'm going to list three major kinds of dreams. One is your brain, as you go through the day, if you notice, like if you watch a scary movie and then you go to sleep, you'll have nightmares. That's because what happens, one of the things your brain does is it has to process all the stuff that happens to you. And so it's literally just pulling files out and throwing that away. Okay, we'll keep that, we'll throw that out. That's why there's stuff that you remember and stuff you don't, because, that's part of what happens when you dream. Your brain is unpacking all of these, tremendous information onslaught that happens to you. So that's one kind of dream. Another kind of dream is either your hopes and or fears. So hopes and fears. So you dream about what you want or what you're afraid of. It's kind of in the same ballpark, things that haven't happened, but things you wish, would happen. Memories of things, you dream about, have recurring dreams. That's kind of in that same pile. And then there are the dreams of actual spiritual experience. When you have an actual vision in your dream, or you travel outside of your body, or there are these kinds of lucid dreams that are really super real, where you talk to an angel or something like that. So those are three major kinds of dreams. And for a shaman, it's really important to understand what's going on in the subconscious mind. This is one of the pitfalls of power plants, ayahuasca and things like that. Now, what modern New Age shamanism, neo-shamanism is doing, in fact, there's a whole group of people out there who believe that shamanism is nothing more than taking power plants. I've run into these people a lot, and this is a new understanding. 20 years ago, that's not what shamanism meant. It might have been a part of it, but it's not what it meant. Now, people throw out the word shamanism, and there's a whole generation of people that think that shamanism is just taking power plants and tripping out. But one of the potential drawbacks of power plants is that unless you know what you're doing and or you have a master shaman who is protecting you and guiding you, you won't know the difference between your own subconscious creation of a world, or your part of your unconscious, or narcissistic projections coming from your own unconscious mind, and an actual experience. And so this is part of the problem, and this is why that science is getting lost, because it's now becoming a tourist trade, and people have decided that ayahuasca is going to cure everything. And so there are people down in South America who have to make a living, and there's a whole lot of money to be made, and I'm not judging them. It's just that's what happens. You take it out of its original context. And plus you have Westerners who are not geared to be able to handle it. Because Westerners, because we have lived in a society that is so materialistic, that many people have been spiritually starved, their unconscious mind and their fears are going crazy. Their unconscious narcissism is nuts. And so they're not really fully formed, and you have to be fully formed to be able to use those things. The good news is that the Chinese and the East Indians, they developed methods to get the same states of awareness and get the same alternate states of consciousness without having to use any chemicals. And that's what Qigong is all about. By the way, if you haven't got it, Celestial Qigong, very important. It's the most powerful thing I know of. And that, if you really want to be able to leave your body and to be able to have, pass through the veil and be on the other side, you're much better off using that than any kind of external chemical which forces the glands of the brain to secrete the chemicals, and then it's very hard on the energy body when you force the glands open like that, which is what power plants do, by the way. So again, I'm not trying to, I don't want to get into that debate about that. Power plants have their place. But as Carlos Castaneda, once again, brilliant writer, complete fraud, but one thing he got right was that power plants, if you use them, should only be used to crack you open. And then they should be discarded, because then they become a trap. And then you should learn the other techniques that open up the chakras and open up the pineal and the pituitary gland. And that comes through a lot of discipline and a lot of practice. Celestial Qigong, in my experience, is the fastest way to get there, with the least side effects. You are going to have the side effect of transformation, which could be frightening and challenging, but you're going to have to go through that anyway, so you might as well just do it. Anyway, so enough about that. So this is the realm that we're going in the southeast realm, and this is the Ansuz rune, which is a shamanic rune of connection and communication. First level receiving communication, but then we start talking about what divine and spiritual communication really is. Now, let's talk about the dwarves. What are the dwarves? I'm getting, I just recently got somebody commented on one of my videos and said, how can I summon a dwarf? Which is, understandable. so let's be clear. The dwarves aren't some outside entity somewhere floating around out there that you can summon and use. I mean, you can use them, don't get me wrong. You can do that with dwarves. But understand that dwarves and the dwarf nature is within you. So let's look at the three beings, the three entities that exist in this universe that are connected specifically and solely to the human path of evolution. And those three entities are dwarves, humans, and elves. The elves, at some point in the past, maybe the very distant past, the part of you that's listening to me now, which is the soul of who you are, you were once a dwarf. And you evolved to the point where you became eligible to become a human soul. And so, and this is again part of, we have all kinds of memories within us. Some of our memories come from, when we were dwarves. Humans, human souls. So when I use the word human, I'm talking about the soul. Dwarves, by the way, are in the navel center. I've got my hand on my navel center. The soul, the human soul, is in the heart center. And this is what we experience life is. This is who you are. I'm Michael William Denny. That's the name of this soul right here, this part that lives in my heart center. But when the soul evolves to a point where it's learned all of the human lessons, then it becomes an elf. It becomes a higher self. First we're a lower self, then we're a middle self, and then we become a higher self. And so your higher self is actually one step away from becoming an elf. And so we have this triune nature, which is Odin, Vili, and Ve. That's what Odin, Vili, and Ve are. Odin is the higher self, Vili is the lower self, the willpower, and Ve, sacred space, or temple. Ve also means temple, is the soul, the heart center. And so the focus of both the lower self and the higher self is here. They're both focused on the evolution of the soul. So the good news is that everybody's watching you and giving you a lot of attention, and everybody wants you to succeed. So this is where communication comes into the discussion. Because without the correct flow of communication between the three selves, that's when you have chaos. Now, part of this human life is you are going to run into chaos, and that's part of it. It's like you're thrown into a game and you're given clues, and so you have to figure out which things work and which don't. That's the whole point of the game, by the way. Life is not meant to be, boring. It's meant to be exciting. It's an adventure. That's why I call it a video game. And when people get bent out of shape because I call it a video game, well, I know you're taking it too seriously. You got a lot of challenges and you're getting overwhelmed by those challenges. I know, because I've been there. I'm not judging you. And then it's not a video game. It's not fun anymore. But that's really what it is for the soul. It's a treasure hunt. You've got this treasure map. You're trying to figure everything out. So in order for that to operate well, the three selves, the higher self, the dwarf nature, and the soul, have to communicate. And the way that communication works is illustrated in the sequence in which the three aspects of Odin are stated, which is Odin, Vili, and Ve. It has to go in that order. If you change the order around, the communication gets all screwed up. By the way, that's the same order that we have in the Taoist tradition, only they call it heaven, earth, and man. Heaven, earth, and man. And again, we're in the human door, man, man. The highest state of the human being is to reach man, or mind. Pure divine mind. And what does the mind do? The mind is is the same as the moon. Remember that the word man means human being, it means divine mind, and it means the moon. So the reason why we're called the moon is very simple. Because the moon does what? It reflects the light of the sun. What is the sun? The Sawol. Sawol is an ancient word for sun. It means soul. So that's why people worship the sun, whether they realize it or not. People who worship the sun are worshiping the divinity. They're seeking to experience and achieve the divinity of their own soul. It's a beautiful tradition, and that's why the sun is the most important planet. It's the soul. The soul is the most important part of you, because that's who you are. It's who you are. But the soul is infinite. The soul doesn't die. The soul may change bodies. It may, change get different personality. It may different avatar for this video game, but the essence of it stays the same. It's eternal, just like the sun. That's why, people worship the sun again, because the sun, it rises in the morning and it sets at night, and there were so many rituals that were done to ensure that the sun did that. Of course, the sun is going to do it whether we, do those rituals or not. Those rituals are about our soul. What people don't realize when they worship the sun that way and they try and preserve the sun to rise in the morning and set at night, is that they are seeking to connect to the eternity, the eternal nature of their own soul. That's what that means. So, the way to get the proper communication within the man is the upper self receives Ansuz, the Ansuz rune, the communication. So if you ever want to connect with your higher self, chant the Ansuz rune, meditate on the Ansuz rune, scroll the Ansuz rune, write it, paint it, whatever. Whenever you work with that Ansuz rune, the first and foremost thing that's going to happen is you are sending out information that you want to receive information from the gods, from the ancestors, from the elves, from the spirit realm. Information that is going to allow you to align yourself with your highest nature. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is that information, which is directly connected to the elves. This is what the elves are all about. The whole purpose of the elves, they only have one purpose. And that one purpose is to guide human beings to their highest evolution. Now, remember I said before that the higher self and the dwarf nature are focused on the soul. They work together. And so the three selves are all about the dissemination of information from the spirit realm. So what happens is that our higher self receives information either from the gods or from the elves or the ancestors. That information is then sent directly to the lower self, the dwarf nature. The whole point of our dwarf nature is to then communicate that information, a messenger. They don't interpret it. This is important. We're going to talk about why this is so important. The dwarves don't interpret that message. They just take it and send it to the soul. The soul then takes that information and makes decisions about what it wants to do with that. Does it want to act on that information or does it not want to act on that information? So when you act contrary to what is in your best evolutionary interest, then guess what happens? The communication completely breaks down. And so this is where we get into the dwarf nature. So the southeast is really about the dwarf nature. So we're talking about all three. I want you to understand how all three of these selves communicate, because the hub of that is the dwarf nature. So Okay, I need to talk about what the dwarf nature is. The dwarf nature is emotional energy. So our emotions are coming from our dwarf nature. And the dwarves, when you read the myths, the dwarves were created by I shouldn't say created, that's not exactly right. But according to the myths, the gods took the ambient life force energy of Ymir's body, which is pure life force energy. This is again why Qigong is so important, connecting to life force energy. And we're like the gods when we do the Qigong energy, whether it's the Hul breath or whether it's celestial Qigong or whether it's any of these energy techniques that I've taught you, and we use that energy to focus our intent, we are like the gods, because that's what the gods did. The gods took the life force energy of the universe and molded it into humanoid form. That's the translation I have. I think that's the best one. It says that they created, they molded it into humanoid form, and those are the dwarves. So the dwarves don't technically have a body, but they are humanoid. Now, this is important to understand because in one of the other myths, Fafnir, that's his name. There's Sigurd and Fafnir. I forget the name of the myth, but it's very important because they're said to be brothers. They're both humanoid. They're both human. They look alike. You can't. By looking at them, you can't tell that they're different species. They look the same. But Fafnir becomes a dragon, and Sigurd ends up having to slay him. And one of the things that Fafnir does is he steals the Aeshjalmr, which is this. Whenever I show you the rune wheel, take the runes out of it, what you have left is the Aeshjalmr. It's this symbol right here. The Aeshjalmr is said to destroy things like greed. And when people used it, it was designed to make sure that greedy people, like kings, people that had too much power, would not abuse their power. If you ever get a chance, go to the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel and look for Ancient Connections. It's one of my really old videos where I talk about this symbol and how old it is and how it's not something that the Norse created, a few hundred years ago. This goes back thousands of years. And the very same symbol is used, not very many know about it, but it's used by the East Indians. And let me see if I can remember what it's called. Anyway, go watch the video. You'll see. It's a really old symbol. And it has to do with, the reason why I've chosen it is because it has to do with purifying negativity. So, as it happens in the myth, Fafnir steals the Aeshjalmr, which Sigurd has to get back. And in order to do it, he has to kill the dragon. The dragon, remember, was once seen as human. It's a dwarf. And so in the Lord of the Rings movies, you've got Smaug, the dragon. And what is he doing? He is in a cave and he is hoarding all of this gold, which represents greed. And if you remember in that movie, it starts with, again, the dwarves. There's a reason for all this. I don't think that, what's his name? The writer, I forget his name. The writer of The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, Tolkien. I don't believe he knew exactly why all this was important, but he was definitely channeling energy. So, the great thing about The Lord of the Rings, whatever you think about it, I honestly believe that's channeled material because it has truths in there about all of this stuff. And if you're a shaman, you know how to interpret these things. So I can see that. I can tell the difference between a channeled movie and just some piece of crap that somebody's thrown together to try to make money. Lord of the Rings was channeled information. And if you remember, it's the dwarves and the dwarf king that then becomes greedy. And it's his greed that does what? It awakens the dragon, and the dragon comes, and and then you've got that whole thing in The Hobbit, the book The Hobbit. Well, that's because the dwarf nature is not when it's isolated from the elves. Again, I'm not trying to do this, but the Lord of the Rings is it's mythological channeled information. What ends up happening is that in the Hobbit, if you remember, the dwarves get resentful towards the elves, and there's this schism, and the dwarves and the elves don't communicate anymore, so much so that the dwarves hate the elves. And this represents the lower self being cut off from the higher self. When the lower self is not in alignment with the higher self, then it stops looking to the elves for guidance. It stops looking to the higher self for guidance. Remember, we talked about the communication has to come from here to the lower self to the middle self. And when this communication gets broken off, everything's, the soul is basically trapped. So if you have that feeling that you're trapped in your body and you're trapped in your life and you don't know what to do next, there's a possibility that the communication between the three selves is broken. Because that's the first thing that's going to happen, is the soul is going to feel trapped, and it will feel powerless, because it will be. Because the dwarves are the workhorse of the human being. The dwarves are pure life force energy, and they're fueled by emotion. This is why meditation is so important. This is why ritual is so important. This is why fantasy. I was talking with somebody the other day, and he was saying that he, like me, he's not very good at meditation. And I explained to him that, using your imagination is a form of meditation. So when you have a fantasy about something, or when you project your wishes in a fantasy way, that's a form of meditation. And that's the kind of stuff that the dwarves respond to. The dwarves respond to emotionally fueled anything. And so this is why, as human beings, one of the tasks that we have is to learn how to have our feelings and take appropriate action. To learn how to, not always respond to our basest emotional reaction, to act in conscious awareness. This is because the soul is making its way from being a dwarf to being an elf, and that's part of the process. And as you know about the elves are very, first off, the elves are very joyous beings. They are, in fact, they're filled with joy. Their essence is pure bliss. But they don't respond, they have a tremendous amount of discipline, and they respond very objectively. And that's why whenever you don't know what to do the elf ritual. Because the elf ritual, you will see things from an objective perspective, you'll get a calmness about you, and you'll get an idea of what it is you need to work on and what your next steps are. It's a direct connection, to the elves. And the elves, all they want for you is to be like them, to help you get to where they are. And they don't impose themselves on you. They wait for you to ask, because you have to learn. And so they're masters at just letting you do whatever you got to do. But when you need them, they're there. So we're talking about the communication. Again, you see the transition from Ansuz to Yera to Manaj. Can you see it? This is all happening in the southeast, the realm of magic. So now let's talk about magic. Magic is the realm of the subconscious mind because the subconscious mind is like the lens. Okay? Yeah, I think you have a pretty clear idea of what the unconscious and what the conscious mind is, but we don't really know what the subconscious really is. But the subconscious acts like a lens. And so when we're in that meditative state, in that subconscious realm, you know, you're not completely asleep, but you're not in waking consciousness. You're in the subconscious realm, the realm of, you know, altered states of consciousness, the realm of meditation, the realm of imagination. I don't know what brain wave, I think there's a alpha or beta or I don't know, delta, I don't know which one it is. Whichever one is connected to like hypnosis, that's the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind, of course, has direct access to the unconscious mind, so that's where it gets confusing. But the subconscious mind has the ability to focus our intentions like a lens. And so when we employ that power, which is what meditation is all about, that's what ritual is all about. So if you've ever noticed when you know, so I know some of you listening have, when you do rituals in the thunder wheel, you find yourself going into an altered state of consciousness. You're tapping into your subconscious mind, and your dwarves are awakening. And they're waiting for you to give them commands. And when you go through the ritual, like when you open up the thunder wheel and you start stating what it is that you're doing, or you whatever your ritual is, the dwarves take that as a command. Once you give them that command, then they go out and they achieve it. So I'm using dwarves in plural because you have multiple aspects within yourself. You can create dwarves. Now we don't need to get into that, but you know, this is again this is what ghosts are. Okay, since we're on this subject, ghosts are not the souls of human beings. When you die, your soul goes to the underworld or to Valhalla or some other place, you know, destined for the soul. If there is an entity that has your name and your identity and is running around, you know, knocking over bookshelves or blowing out candles or whatever it is that they do, or moaning in the middle of the night, that's a dwarf. That is an emotional construct that is trapped in a loop. And the only people who leave ghosts behind are people whose communication between the three selves was not intact at the moment of their death. So this is why if people are obsessed about riches, or if they're angry or obsessed about revenge, or they're sad, you know, they commit suicide, all that kind of stuff, then the emotions connected to that, which would be a dwarf, gets stuck in this realm. Now eventually that dwarf will lose the awareness. You know, a ghost isn't eternal. After I don't know how many hundreds of years, depending on how intense the emotional attachment is to whatever it is that, you know, was going on, the dwarf will drop that identity, and then it becomes a nature spirit, and then it has an opportunity to become a dwarf again, or a soul, and all that. You have a responsibility to your dwarves to stay connected to your higher self. Okay, so I don't know if you can still hear me. If I have a stupid look on my face, it's because according to my window here, that somehow the streaming got stopped. So whatever it was that I was saying when the streaming stopped, that means that what I had to say was very important. So I'll have to go back and look at that. That's whatever, you know, by the way, those of you who talk to me on the phone, if somehow the phone drops out, whatever I've said just before the phone drops out, that's the universe's way of underlining that. Take note of that. That's very important stuff. So, anyway, so it says the stream health is bad, but I can still see that it's streaming, so I'm going to keep going. All right, so my communication with my three selves was jammed there, so I forgot where I was going. Anyway, so I was getting off topic here. We're talking about dwarves, men, and elves. That's the trajectory. So going from the southeast to the northwest, that's where our destiny lies, is to become an elf, to become a shining one, to be a guide for human beings. That's why being helpful to others in this life is good, because it aligns you towards that. So, focusing the lens of the subconscious mind to create, to use the power of the life force energy of the world to create, whether that is to manifest a wish, whatever it is. This is what magic is. We're actually taking energy and morphing it into reality. So those of you who are familiar with healing, I'm going to share, there's a couple ways to do it, and I'm going to use a term now. One would be the dwarf method of healing, and the other would be the elf method of healing. The dwarf method of healing, and I know a guy who does this, a Qigong master. Of course, he wouldn't ever use these words to describe what he does, but this is what he does. What he does is he gathers life force energy. He's a Qigong master, so he will gather life force energy and he will store it in his navel center. Then when he goes to heal somebody, he releases that energy out of his navel center into the person's body in order to heal them. So if you want to learn to become a healer like he is, you can't do it unless you become a master of absorbing life force energy. The elf method of healing, that is best represented by, what is that called? Japanese form of healing, Reiki. And Reiki, you're not using your own energy, you're just channeling, again, life, higher forces, and you're just the conduit. You're not using any of your own energy, you're just a conduit. And you sort of decide, what you're really doing is, you're kind of fine-tuning what the frequency is, depending on, what color you focus on or whatever it is. I'm not a Reiki master, so I don't know what they do. But I understand the difference. So when we're talking about magic, we're talking about dwarf magic. And dwarf magic is taking life force energy and then using it to create, to alter reality. That's the dwarf magic. And so the pitfall of dwarf magic is that you can get caught into what's called, black magic, which is when you're doing things for your own selfish ends. But magic in and of itself is neither black nor white, and you are doing it all the time. You are creating all the time. So we could get into that. Anyway, let's see how far we're getting. Pretty far along. Yeah, we're almost done. So, you thought I was going to talk about the Ansuz rune, and what I'm really talking to you about is the realm of the southeast. And this is what the Ansuz rune is all about. So, to be able to get the most out of this rune, I recommend working with it to receive information. The end result is that you will be able to communicate more clearly, because this is a rune of communication. And if you've noticed, think of a teacher who you would consider to be a highly evolved person or a conscious person. You know that they have the ability to speak, and within a few words, those words are packed full of information. And this is why the best way to learn from me, especially those of you who work with me personally, is not try and memorize everything that I say. Just let the information wash over you. Whatever you can consciously glean, fine. But the majority of it is going to go into your subconscious and your unconscious mind and won't be available to you immediately, but it'll be there years later. This is one of the ways shamanic communication works. And there are people who have, I didn't make this up, but more than one person independently of each other. They've called me a word shaman. So I take that as a tremendous compliment because I'm not aware that I'm doing that. I'm doing my best to try and communicate. You know, I have these zip files that gets downloaded into my spirit that as long as they're in that zip file, I have this awareness of them and they just seem like normal. Yeah, this is obvious. In my mind, this seems apparent and everybody is aware of it, which is confusing to me why people do such stupid things, because it's very apparent that, you know, X, Y, and Z is true. And that's not always the case. Not everybody knows, you know, we don't all share the same understandings. And so when I do what I'm doing right now, which is I'm really unpacking a zip file and putting into words, into these limited words, these huge concepts that to me are just, you know, a concept that I'm aware of. And so where I'm going with this is that as a shaman, it's going to be important for you to have mastery over this Ansuz rune, because that's the ability you will get. What the yogis called Vak Siddhi. Siddhi. S-I-D-D-H-I. Siddhi. It means perfection, power. Vak means voice. So it would be like a voice superpower. And Vak Siddhi means that you have the ability to speak truth into existence. This is again the Ansuz rune. The Ansuz rune, when you have that rune embedded within you and you are flowing, you can speak reality into existence. So that's why it's really important for people who are, you know, shamans, they're working towards that. They have to be very careful of what they say. Because just the nature of, if you've connected all of these three souls together and you've learned the art of true communication, which first has to be the communication between the three selves, but when you combine that with the communicative ability of a shaman, it comes true. I'm thinking of something I saw it on YouTube, and I was looking for, you know, old ancient shamanic whatever, and I think it was, I don't know if it was in Romania, or I think it was in Romania, and it was a guy who was practicing, you know, he was nominally a Christian, which is what happens, you know, happened in the Middle Ages, is that shamans ended up, you know, becoming Christian, but they still practiced the old ways. This is one of those guys who he was a healer, practiced the old ways. And you know, he claimed that he had to be very careful because what he said would happen. So he had to be very careful about what he said. And so this is, you know, that means that his communication, his Ansuz power, the power of Ansuz within him, was developed to such a point where he could speak things into existence. So understand that the kind of communication that happens on the base level, which is, you know, I don't know what percentage of the population, but, you know, a lot of people in this world, they communicate on this very base level that is a very crude form of communicating concepts and ideas. But there isn't the same amount of power in it. When you are operating from true Ansuz rune, the true connection of all three of the selves connected to the higher realms, when you have that flowing, then words are not just things that are used to get across, you know, bits of information. They actually create. They have the power to create. And this was the power of language. And this, this is why our ancestors, even before they, were literate, they would, they would carve runes into things. Like they would carve runes into their swords, because those runes had life within them. So when you chant any of the runes, again, all they are, it sounds really exotic. I use the word Ansuz, but it's only because it's an ancient word. The runes are just the sounds of the alphabet. That's all that they are. They're just the sounds of the alphabet. So it sounds really esoteric, but it's actually the most basic of tools that we have. And our ancestors worshiped them to such a degree that they gave each one of the sounds, whether it's a vowel or a consonant that can be spoken, the building blocks of language. They respected them to such a degree that each one of them had the power, divine power, to create. And so we can even go so far as to say that we have Odin to thank for the ability to communicate, because he was the one who discovered the runes. So we could talk about, what does that mean? Does that mean at some point in our evolution, that's, that part of Odin was the part that allowed us to communicate? The interesting, the reason why that apes can't talk is not because they can't communicate in English language. I mean, you can teach a gorilla, the meanings of, the words in the English language, but they can't communicate it. One of the main reasons is because there's a little tiny bone in our voice box that allows us to communicate through words. And great apes don't have it. Chimpanzees don't have it. Orangutans, gorillas don't have it. So there's something different about human beings. Now, what's interesting is that our oldest humanoid ancestors, they call her Lucy, the Australopithecus, I forget what the name of it, Australopithecus something. We're talking like 2.5 million years ago. And if, you were to look at it, it would probably, if we were to go back, we would see what basically looked like a short, hairy, monkey walking around on two legs. But those proto-humans had that little bone here. And what some scientists have concluded is that maybe they had a form of language. And so you have words like mama and papa. Everywhere in the world, if you say mama, they know you mean mother. If you say papa, baba, papa, dada, they know you mean father. These are words that are probably the oldest in human language. Maybe they're millions of years old. These words, these sounds. So I'm just giving you an idea of how powerful communication is. So I've talked a lot. I've given you a lot of information. We're just hitting about the hour mark here. So this isn't something that you can just take and do. You really need to absorb and meditate on these concepts. You may need to come back to this video and watch it a few more times, because there's probably some stuff in here that you're not going to catch first time around. I'm not saying I'm anything special. When I go back and listen to myself, I go, I'm not even fully aware of the stuff that's coming through me. I have to go back and listen to myself to hear the message. I'm sometimes just the conduit. So that's it for now. As I've always said before, get the 3 books. I've already showed you that. I've already told you that Celestial Qigong is very important. It's the most powerful tool I know of to connect with life force energy and vibrate on the level of the Ascended Masters. If you haven't seen that, here's what the DVD looks like. And I believe that there's a streaming version somewhere on Amazon for that as well. That's it for now. Now here I want to I just want to encourage you to continue to do this work every week and do something every day. It's helpful when you have a vow. This is again magic again, when you spend 40 days doing a ritual. And if you haven't gotten a Vedic astrological reading from me, you can go to thundershamanism.com and get one. That is incredibly powerful way of finding a ritual. I can help you design your perfect ritual for you. When you do a ritual for 40 days, that is the Ansuz rune as well. Prayer, communication, ritual, focusing that subconscious mind to manifest your desires. And this is what we are meant to do. So, this is why all cultures at some point in time did ritual. Excuse me. This is why we did ritual. Because we are destined to be creators, like the celestial deities. We are destined to be able to take life force energy and mold it and create. And one of the most powerful ways we do that is through language. Specifically when language is used in its highest form, which is to speak into existence life force energy. Concepts. We're taking concepts, putting them into a sound, and that sound is then creates your world. And as I said before, my girlfriend has said to me a few times, she said a couple times, she said, you're not human. And I don't know what she means by that. What do you mean by that? She says, because you say things that then happen. You just are talking out loud one day and you say, you know what I want to have happen? I want to have this, that, and the other thing. And then you just keep walking like you haven't done anything. And then 2 weeks later or a month later, exactly what you said has happened. And by then you forgot that you even said it. And I think about it and I go, yeah, she's right. And all that really means is that I have at least gotten something right in terms of this shamanism. And this is what a shaman does. A shaman has the ability to speak their intention through the power of language, through the power of the runes, which is sound, which is putting your intention into the sound and creating. Many traditions say that the universe was created through sound, was spoken into existence. I'm not a big fan of the Abrahamic tradition, but that's one thing they got right. That comes from their pre-monotheist shamanic tradition. The Chinese also say that as well. That the power of the word is what creates. That's what makes you divine. That's why it's called God mouth. The mouth of the gods. And it also explains what humans are. Because the Ansuz rune is placed in the southeast, it is a rune of human beings. It's at the human gate, the human door, which is the dwarf home. And so we have the ability to translate and command the dwarves. Again, if you haven't seen it, there's the video on the YouTube channel where I talk about how the original word for magic was called dwarf speak. Dwergmal. Dwarf speak. And it, I don't know how you need to interpret that. It could mean a specific language that only dwarves understand, which meant that the sorcerer or the shaman had the ability to speak that language so that he could command the dwarves to go create things for him. Or it simply meant to speak to your dwarves. To speak to the dwarves and command them. And what's important to understand about the dwarves is that the dwarves do not respond to anything other than life force energy, which is why they respond to emotion, because emotions are life force energy. But that is not as powerful as actually being able to channel life force energy into your words. When you can channel life force energy into your words, the dwarves have to obey, because the dwarves feed off of life force energy. This is why people who abuse their bodies, recreational chemicals or anger or victim mentality or anything that siphons out the life force energy out of you. Stress, greed, fear, all of these things siphon life force energy out of you. And people who are chronically low of life force energy cannot speak their world into existence. They can talk all day about what they want in their lives. They can chant for things. They can intend for things. They can use what we call positive affirmations, which is nothing short of just chanting a spell. They can do that all day and nothing changes. And the reason for that is because they don't have the life force energy to put into their words, and when that happens, the dwarves do not respond. So the dwarves will respond. Again, that's why celestial qigong is so important. Anyway, I thought I was done, but I guess I wasn't. So life force energy is, again, I suppose, the key. So that's it for now. Again, this is something we're just going to have to stick a pin in, and we'll come back to it later. So if you want to chant the Ansuz rune, just know that this is the end result of Ansuz. If you want to connect to the dwarf home, the Ansuz rune will give you authority to go into that realm and summon the dwarves, talk to the dwarves. This is the rune that will command them. This is the rune that will make you reach your potential as a divine man, a divine human mind on earth. This is the gateway to the human realm, which means what? Not these dwarf dragon type of, emotionally driven, unconscious people. It's the realm of Man, which means the highest mind, the mind that is filled with life force energy that reflects the light of the soul, that has direct connection and communication and cooperation with the celestial beings, the ancestors, the dwarves. And it's the one that gives you the power to create through ideas and intention. So we could talk a lot about this for a long time. So we're just going to have to put a pin in it for now, and we'll come back to it later. That's it. I recommend, again, Celestial Qigong. I recommend getting a Vedic astrological reading from me so that you know how to put, specifically how to put all this stuff into practice. For those of you who haven't, I recommend considering moving up to another level of subscription so that you're working with me. I have limited amount of time. More people are signing up. Get on it before I run out of space. But that's the best way to learn from me. Other than that, my Patreon friends, if you need to, you can communicate with me on this site. You can also communicate with others and share your experience with others. So that's it for now, my friends. Until next time, may the power of the gods grant you the ability to cooperate with the forces of the universe to speak into existence your perfect and most fulfilling soul destiny. Thank you.